Ajay.
Hey Vishal.
Hey, hi. One second. So I don't see you properly. Could you please turn on your cam? Oh, sorry, light.
The light is on. Oh, okay, hold on.
Yeah, now it's a little bit better.
Still it's the same.
Yeah, still it's the same. Maybe you can set opposite sides so that your face is in dark. Okay.
Okay, let me do one thing. Let me remove this tag. Okay, what about now? Is it the same?
Yeah, a little bit.
Let me try something. Hold on. What about now?
No, it's better.
It's better? Okay.
Yes, Ajay. Could you please talk about yourself and your past experience?
Sure. So right now I'm working mostly with Azure and Azure Devops. So that's how I was introduced to my current client, and I was mostly moved into migration initially. So we have our code in TFS 2010, 2015, and then we migrated all of our code from TFS 2010, 2015 to Azure DevOps latest. So that's one of the initial tasks, and my day-to-day responsibilities are working mostly on builds and releases based on the new requirements that comes up from developers. So we are a team of 8 engineers, 2 seniors, 2 mid levels, and 2 junior levels. And my roles and responsibilities are based on the requirements comes. I'll be working on creating the builds, and making sure those were properly configured with specific required configuration that is in place, working with the devs, working with the QA, and making sure those deployments were done properly, and making sure then taking it to the production. So we use C# code, and we also use some .NET Framework, .NET Core, and right now we are having applications developed on .NET 6 too. So we are writing pipelines for that. So so this is the basic introduction, and based on the questions you ask, I can answer more.
Okay. Yeah. Do you got any experience with PowerShell?
PowerShell, yeah, I do have experience on PowerShell. So right now we use some kind of deployments to cloud services. So where we have some PowerShell written in order to swap the slots. You know about cloud services, right? So the way our deployments works are we deploy it into the staging slot first, and then we swap it. So we write some PowerShell over there to make the swap happen over there. And so this is one of the part of the work to write some PowerShell scripts, and making sure all the deployments were in place. So I do have experience on that.
Okay. So do we know what are PowerShell modules?
PowerShell modules, yeah, I do PowerShell modules in sense is it in Azure or just normal PowerShell?
Just normal PowerShell modules.
Yeah, I do know a few of them, but not much in specifically, but just based on the requirement.
Okay. You said you worked on pipelines, correct?
Yeah, I work on Azure Devops pipelines. Yeah.
So do you got any experience on EV2, Express V2 deployments?
Express V2, no, I don't have any experience on specifically Express V2. So is that specifically in Azure or?
Yeah, in Azure. It's one of the services in Azure.
Mm-hmm. So right now, how we have our pipelines are previously we used to have them in Classic, but now we are having them in YAML structure. So we specifically have a build, deploy, and build and deploy templates where we configure all our stages and all those things. So build have its own set of specific tasks. And previously it was in Classic, and I suggested, and that was implementation that done by me to make those Classic stuff into the YAML templates. So all our code is in YAML right now, and that's how the deployment is going to take place. So as I mentioned already, we have a build and deploy related templates, right? So based on those requirements, we push them into the Azure cloud, and we use cloud service for the deployment part.
Okay, so basically you do build a deployment on a cloud services, right?
Yeah.
In Azure. Okay. Mm. So let's say if any build is like failed, okay, it's like taking a more time to deploy in Azure cloud services.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you troubleshoot that?
So initially, I will check like what's going on with that specific cloud service. So I go into the cloud service and see what kind of roles are running, so how many nodes are running, and I'll see if they are like starting, or if they stuck, or if they got in running state or not. So that's how I'm gonna troubleshoot it. So if the issue doesn't gonna resolve even after restarting it, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into the specific nodes IP and go into the machine and see what kind of thing is what kind of errors that we are getting while running the application. So that's one of the that's how I will be keeping track of the builds if they are not running properly. And also the thing sometimes it might be on the build side. So if the cloud service configuration and cloud service definition files doesn't have the proper proper deployments that were added in the release tasks, so that could be one of the reason too, right? So even if the deployment happens, so I will be testing directly by deploying into the staging slot which is available just to test it, right? So this is one of the good thing with cloud services. We have a staging slot which is very helpful. So in order to troubleshoot the things, so I directly deploy them into the staging slots without disturbing the production slot, and then based on that I will be trying to troubleshoot. So it's basically like end to end, right? So the issue might be anywhere. It might be on the build or the list part. So I'll just try to make sure like where exactly, because all the tasks were in place and everything runs smooth most of the time. If something happens, if it comes from the QA, I'm not sure how exactly the functional things works, because QA is a different part, right? So I will be making sure all the machines specific to that cloud service and all the builds and the packages were as expected, and I'll try to verify those first before going into the deployment part.
Okay. Do you know what are artifacts?
Yeah,
what's that?
So in Azure, whenever we do a build, so what happens is like the artifacts will be generated based on the tasks that we give, right? So those artifacts will be stored in artifact staging directory in the panel that is showed in the Azure DevOps portal itself. So those artifacts come from the type of configuration that we give in the YAML. So if it is a dev artifact, all the dev artifacts gonna populate. And if the test, QA, prod, pre-prod, prod central, so all those different types of environments based on the tasks that we give, like they will get published specifically for that specific service in the staging directory. So it's like a place where to store, and it's a set of the it's like a package file which is directly stores on the Azure DevOps.
Okay. Can you tell me what's the difference between public, private, and hybrid clouds?
Public, private, and hybrid. So public clouds are like, for example, let's consider Azure and AWS. So these are like public clouds which are like having its own infrastructure as pay as you go, like how much you're gonna use, you can use it. And private clouds are like OpenStack or I know about a little bit of the OpenStack. That's the private cloud. Specifically to some specific clients, they use their own cloud in order to just do their deployments based on their internal infrastructure. So that's one of the that's like there is only the pricing difference comes where we use a public cloud. That's why most of the people suggest using with the public cloud, right? So let's take the example of Microsoft. So we have a So we have one of the good thing is like if a client takes a premier support, then whenever some kind of issue happens on the infrastructure level or on production level, we can just raise a ticket and Microsoft calls in within minutes. So that's one of the main importance why the public clouds are important, and something about the private clouds. Public clouds, and hybrid clouds are like it's a mix of both public and private. So that's the understanding that I'm having specifically in those clouds.
Okay. Do you know what is IaaS and PaaS in Azure?
Yeah, so IaaS is like infrastructure as a service, right? So the main components are like virtual machines, scale sets, and PaaS is like platform as a service, where it involves some kind of app services for the deployment part specifically, and the cloud services that I already mentioned. So it's like specifically it's those are the components of the cloud, right? So there's also one more thing called software as a service, where we can also use the software specifically as a service. For example, let's consider the logic apps, which we can use to integrate them directly into Azure DevOps using by writing some kind of JSON file formats. So that kind of implementation is used when we try to when we try specifically to get some notifications if something is down in the production or even lower environments.
Okay. So you said about logic apps. So have you created any apps there?
Yeah, so these logic apps specifically we used App Insights in our production. So what happens is like I implemented, like, this is one of the scenario where I worked, and there are a couple of other scenarios I'm going to explain once I explain this part. So whenever something goes down, we have front-end services and back-end services. For example, let's see account service or location, store locator. So these are the front-end services that we have. And when in production, when some user is trying to access that specific store, if he is not able to access, so there might be some issue, right? So there's a cloud service associated with it, and we use some application insights specifically and wrote some conditions over there. If these many nodes are down, or if these many nodes are available, and this many number of nodes are just available for running, so that's when we wrote some kind of conditions. So based on those, we're getting notified using logic apps. So that's one of the good implementation that we have done. And another scenario where we use logic apps is like in order to get the Azure DevOps notifications, which can be directly integrated into the Azure DevOps, like whenever a build is created, or whenever a release is created, whenever a pull request is created, or whenever some kind of task is assigned to us, or whenever some kind of issue happens. So that's how the logic app is used by my currently.
Okay. So I see you work on both Azure and AWS cloud services.
Mm-hmm.
So do you see any differences between those services in terms of performance, or in terms of quality, or in terms of pricing?
So in terms of pricing, it depends on the type of application that we use, right? For example, let's consider if you take Java. So Java, it's like it uses as per my understanding. So if you take Java, and so most of the code is like Linux based, and which is little compatible with AWS infrastructure, where the CloudFormation templates written are directly integrated specifically for Jenkins, and that's how the deployment patterns works, right? So, but let's come to the Azure DevOps. When we come to Azure, so Microsoft is this is one of the thing. So if we use C#, we can directly integrate into the Azure DevOps instead of going to external Git. We can use it, but we already have something feature that is already used by Microsoft, right? And so whenever we take C# or whenever we take .NET, or when we take .NET different frameworks in it, or different core versions in it, so whenever we try to implement something, so the Microsoft apps run in the same pattern, right? So if it goes to AWS, the only thing that I didn't like is it doesn't have its own console, like whatever you have with Azure DevOps. So that's one of the thing. And my main feature of interest that realizes like from past 4 to 5 years I've been working with Azure and trying to stay in Azure because that's one of the reason. And even I was like worked when we started calling Azure as Windows Azure, right? We previously it's called as Windows Azure. So that's when I was like very much interested to work mostly in Azure based apps. So that's the only difference between the AWS and Azure. And regarding the performance wise, it depends on the application. So to my knowledge, using either cloud is the same, but going with Microsoft, with written the same C#, .NET, and Azure DevOps might help us to save some money over there.
Okay. Let's say you're deploying a build on a cloud service A. Okay. The same time the cloud service B is went down. Okay. So in that case, what would be your approach to bring that cloud services back?
I want to understand like how
Let's
cloud
say
service.
your application is hosted on two cloud services A and cloud services B. Okay, so the application running on like multiple instances on A and B services. Okay, so let's say you're doing a deployment on A cloud service. Okay, so same time the B cloud service completely down. So all the role instances are down. Okay, so how do you bring them back, and what would be your approach towards the deployment or bring the services back?
Yeah, so we have a similar scenario over here. So we have our production and production central configured on the same service. So whenever some kind of cloud service goes down in prod, we already have traffic managers that were pointed to those cloud services. So we create a traffic manager and keep both the endpoints where it shows if both of them are running, then it's gonna use production. If something goes down, then it's gonna directly switch to the prod central. So that's one of the implementation that is done recently. We had several prod issues. So what we did is we started creating prod central as a backup for prod. So we implemented some traffic managers over there, and we wrote some conditions, and we configured the URL for the cloud service which is already used for one cloud service and the other one for prod central for other cloud service. So so this is one of the main important thing, right? So traffic managers plays a very major role, and whenever one of the cloud service is down, then immediately the other traffic manager comes into picture, and all the environments, because prod and prod central everything is same, like whatever the stuff that you implemented from code to like from a cloud service level storage account and whatever the service networks storage accounts whatever the resource groups associated with it are in two different patterns, but those can be switched directly using the traffic manager. So that's how the thing works right now. So once that the switch is completed, the prod central gonna run for a while, and we will be getting notified anyway using our Azure DevOps using Logic Apps thing. So that's when our prod, whenever whoever is in the on call, they will be trying to investigate why exactly one of the cloud services went down, and what kind of things are happening, if all the roles are still in the starting state, or if they are running state or in a busy state. So that's how we'll be troubleshooting, and we use traffic managers to do the flip.
Okay, so what about the deployment? You continue with the deployment, or you stop the deployment there? So why? Because that completely the cloud services, whatever the traffic is coming to that DC is completely down. What about the deployment?
So this is one of production scenario that I mentioned. So yes. If you're trying to do a production, like if you're trying to do some deployment to the production, then we keep the old code in the prod central itself. We don't disturb that one. Not only one service, like we keep everything, right? So if in order for a prod to run, every cloud service associated, like the front and back end should be the same, right? So regarding the deployment that you mentioned, we just try to keep the prod central in place until the production is fixed.
Okay. Do you got any experience with Git?
Git, yeah, we use Azure Devops Git right now, right? So I did use a lot of stuff like creating the repos, pushing the code, adding the branch policies, and creating the PRs, tagging them, tagging the new changes. We follow Git flow model, and we have master and develop branches. So that's one of the implementation I'm part of in my current work.
Okay. So can you tell me, let's say, like if I ask you to update one configuration and push it to a master branch, okay? So can you tell me the workflow, like the flow, how you do that?
Yeah. So whenever a requirement comes, let's say I was asked to enhance something for a build template. So what I initially do is I create a feature branch out of or based on what type of scenario that I get. If it's a new feature, I create a feature branch out of develop. If it is a release related issue, I could release / something. So I create a branch out of develop first. I do the modifications, and then I'll try to make the changes in my feature branch without disturbing any of the develop or any branches first. And once that is done, I'll try to create a release branch, and then I'll try to create a tag, and I will merge back to develop, and we'll keep both develop and master branches in sync. So before merging back to develop or master branches, what we do is we follow a tagging process. So the tagging process is like very important, and it's a necessary part, because let's say in the future we'll be getting some kind of issue and we are not sure why the issue came, right? So what exactly we do is we go back to that specific tag and try to test if that specific case is working in the production or not. So that's how that's how the tagging part is very important and very useful, right? So that's one of the implementation that we are currently in place. So that's how we used to pattern. And previously they used to do the changes directly to develop and master branches, but as a DevOps team we added some branch policies for both master and develop branches. We added policies in such a way that no one are allowed to do the changes. Only specific set of people were added in that group can do only those changes, and what kind of builds should be triggered whenever a change is done, and what kind of triggers that were given if the and what kind of work items, what kind of work items should be linked, what kind of code quality that should be there, and how much lines of code that is tested, or how much lines of code is having the quality. Like we put some kind of coverage YAML files for that specific change that we done. So based on those changes, we'll be just pushing those and using the Git flow process.
Okay. Do you know what are merge conflicts?
Yeah, so basically the merge conflicts arises whenever we do whenever we follow some bad merging process, right? So let's take an example. If there is let's take an example. If A and B are working together, and A is working and B is working, and out of a develop branch, and A directly pushed those changes back to develop without the B consent, and now B is trying to push those changes directly into develop branch. Then there the merge conflict arises, right? Because the changes which were not done by B were not there with A, right? So that's how the merge conflicts arises. So that's one of the main reason why we implemented the tagging process. And whenever someone does a change for that specific branch, then that's how whenever someone creates a pull request, that's there itself the person gets stopped, because he'll be having merge conflicts, and then he goes back and gets the latest code, and you just do the feature changes, and that's how the process is in place.
Okay. So if I ask you, what are your top 3 technical skills, what that would be?
So my top 3 technical skills are like first thing is Azure DevOps. I can work on creating the classic stuff. I can work on the normal YAML templates based on the type of requirement that comes from developers. So I'm strong at that, and maintaining it does require, right? So the kind of policies that I mentioned, I will try to make sure create certain set of group of people and add those approvers for that specific repos that I created, and for that specific builds and releases. And the second thing is like making sure the infrastructure in Azure, if it is in Azure, like creating cloud services or creating app services, or provisioning some kind of infrastructure, and provisioning some kind of storage accounts, and also so provisioning part, I'm good at that. And the third one is like notifications. Those play important role, right? So I'm pretty good at these 3 type of stuff, specifically in Azure, and that's what I'm trying to get expert at, and that's why I'm working on my AZ400 DevOps Administrator certification right now. So I was trying to stay in DevOps with Azure and Microsoft. That's one of my goal in the future, and my temporary goal.
Yeah, that's good actually. So what's your work authorization, Ajay?
I'm on my H1.
Or H1. So you're currently working with pods. What's that?
Yes, pods, Clearwater.
Pods. Okay.
So pods is like moving storage, like U-Haul. You know U-Haul, right? So many of them don't know pods. Only the reason why many of them don't know pods is like they are like emerging now. We do have our client in Australia also, but most of the stuff is like getting moved to cloud right now, and we are trying to improve the processes right now. So that's that's about my client, moving and storage.
Mm-hmm. So you are okay with the relocation, right?
Yeah.
To Redmond?
Yeah.
I think currently in Florida. Right?
I'm in Florida, yes.
Okay. I think that's all I have. So do you have any questions for me, Ajay?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Like the title that you mentioned, specifically, if you're aware or not, mostly is in Azure, ADO, and VSO, right? So I'm trying to understand, are there any projects that you are trying to migrate into current Azure DevOps, or?
No. It's, so we are working for a Microsoft. So we are a vendor for a Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Microsoft is our customer. Okay. So we are closely working with them. So there is nothing like migration. So because as we work for Microsoft, so they already like onboarded to Azure DevOps.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just to as position like as a job description says build engineer, right? So we'll be working on the deployments.
Okay.
So whatever you mentioned, right? Like creating the pipelines and all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they're already pre-created the pipelines are there. Just we do a deploy. We get a build from a developer.
Mm-hmm.
So we do work on a deployments.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they might ask you to like create a new pipelines.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So based on the requirements, so we do create a pipelines and
Mm-hmm.
we do deployments. So when I say deployments, it's deployments like Azure has like many inbuilt services. Okay, so we'll be supporting those services, Azure services.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so we do work on a PowerShell.
Mm-hmm.
So if you for Microsoft, the PowerShell is the mandatory
skill
set.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. So apart from that, like if any building got failed,
Mm-hmm.
so we do
troubleshooting. Yeah.
We do work with our
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like all deployment management and incident management, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
We will be working with our closely Microsoft customers.
Oh, nice. Oh, is it? Okay. I used to create Microsoft tickets when I was in my previous client.
Yes. So you'll be working on those Microsoft tickets.
Okay.
You will be creating tickets for Microsoft.
Okay.
So you should address the customer. In case like it's all when you say when we work for a deployment, it's all about like internal ticket. It's not like you will be getting a customer ticket.
It's part of the job, right?
Yeah, it's part of the
Part of the job. And what kind of code base is it? Is it C Sharp or .NET?
This is like a C Sharp. Okay, and some they use like some in-the monitoring tool called as a Jarvis and all. It's all related to Microsoft technologies.
Okay. Jarvis.
Yeah, Jarvis. This is like it's a Microsoft internal tool for monitoring. So
Okay.
whenever there is a like you work on the cloud services, right? When there is a spike in the cloud services, so you used to alerts, okay,
Yes.
tickets.
Yeah.
So all those configured in Jarvis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You don't use app insights, right?
Completely to Azure.
Okay. And it's not service based, right? Is it service based or I'm just trying to understand the client.
What is it? I didn't get you.
The client, like right now we have location service, store locator, and all those things. So you guys have any specific service based, like account service, like the bills that you mentioned, right? So.
So I'm not sure on that exact like which services we are supporting for. Okay, so Azure has like many services, right? So we'll be supporting one of the services. I'm not sure like which service they exactly are looking for.
Okay.
So wherever you go, like which service, irrespective of service, okay, the workflow, the infrastructure remains same.
Okay. Yeah, that's all the questions I had. Yeah.
Thanks, Ajay. Thanks for joining in.
No problem. Sure. All right. Nice talking to you too. Talk to you soon.
Same. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Bye. Have a good day.